Okay, so then from the nephron loop, now we're going to end up at the DCT and the collecting system. So again, there's many things going on here. So what I'd like to think of it in general, the DCT and the collecting system, they're more about final adjustments. Like the PCT is actually where you did a lot of the trading between the capillaries and the renal tubules. And then the nephron loop, very important in reabsorbing water and salts and ions. Now, DCT is where you do final adjustments and your nephrons kind of say, okay, do we want to dump more acid? Do we want to dump more base? Do we want to dump ions or reabsorb some ions? Or do we want to reclaim more water or reclaim less water? So it's more, I like to think of like PCT, major trader, but the DCT is kind of like the fine tuning of that final urine product. So notice that the DCT, very few microvilli. Why? Because again, that PCT that was earlier in the flow of fluid throughout your renal tubules, that was where you did most of the reabsorption. The lack of microvilli in the inside of the DCT is a big clue that reabsorption is not one of its major functions. So again, the PCT already reabsorbed most of the nutrients, and the DCT does do some reabsorption. It can reabsorb some ions like sodium chloride, calcium, but it also secretes. And what can it secrete? Well, say your blood is tending toward the acidic side. It might want to dump more acids and namely protons, into your urine. It also secretes ammonia and xenobiotics and drugs in both the DCT and collecting system. And toxicants, things that are harmful to your body. So I like to think of it like, if you ever gone camping, like, do you want to use the bathroom upstream or downstream of where your water source is? You kind of want to like not go go to the bathroom upstream of where you are, right? So DCT is kind of like the final bathroom break. You're going to finally dump all the waste that you don't want before you have the final product. So again, the DCT is more about secretion, not so much about reabsorption. But so what we have here, well, okay, so then do we have time for aldosterone? I think one thing I definitely want you to know is the effects of ADH, antidiuretic hormone. And again, a big callback all the way back to chapter 18. We did touch upon it lightly there, but let's talk about it a little more in detail. So this is what happens if you don't have ADH in the equation. So here we have the renal corpuscle making filtrate, and then you have the tubular fluid flowing throughout your nephron, the PCT, you have all the water being reabsorbed from the tubular fluid into the medulla and into the bloodstream. Then you dump out some more ions into your bloodstream and reabsorb it. And if you didn't have ADH, you would have this very large volume of very watery urine. Now, remember, antidiuretic hormone, diuresis refers to the production of urine, right? But A in ADH stands for antidiuretic, so you want to produce less urine. Now, how does it produce less urine? So what happens is that ADH acts upon the DCT and also the collecting system as well. So what ADH does is it actually opens these little channels in your called aquaporins in the membranes of the cells that line this area. And actually, I wish I should draw a picture of that. Maybe I'll if I have time, I can do another animation of that later. But what happens is it opens all these little pores called aquaporins in these cells. And remember, the renal medulla is very salty, right? If you open all these little holes that in the protein channels in these cells that allow water to move, which way will the water move? It will move from a very low concentration of solute to a very salty concentration, right? So that's what happens here. These aquaporins kind of increase the rate of water osmosis and transport from the tubules, or actually at this point it's the collecting system, the tubules and collecting system back into the surrounding fluid and back into the capillaries. So ADH is very important in moving water and reclaiming water from the DCT and the collecting duct. So what happens is that you start to produce a small volume concentrated urine. And why is that? Well, 92% roughly about roughly about 92% of your urine is water. So the less water you have in your urine, the less volume of urine you have. But notice that what does it do to the color of your urine? Well, one major effects of ADH is that it reduces water volume in your urine. So pretend this is your urine, and one thing that causes your urine to be colored is urobilin or urochrome. I think Commonwealth countries like using urochrome versus urobilin, but it's a yellow pigment. So this is why urine is typically yellow. Now, what happens if you start to lose water and remove it from your urine? Well, if you concentrate this pigment, it ends up becoming more concentrated and brighter, right? So this is why when you're dehydrated, or if you have a lot of ADH going on, this is why your urine gets darker, because you have more of this pigment concentrated per volume of urine. It's going to appear darker. Or if you've done art and used watercolors, I mean, it's easy to take a very dark color and then dilute it with water and make it fainter and fainter. Well, again, the more water you add to watercolor paint, the fainter and lighter the color, right? Well, the opposite is also true. If it was somehow able to remove water from a watercolor paint and then make it more concentrated, the color would get darker. So that's how ADH, this is why you produce less urine and darker urine if you have more ADH levels in your body. All right, so then we have DCT. Again, DCT is reabsorbs some ions, and definitely some water if you have ADH. This is why I put depends. It depends if you have ADH there or not. And secretion, you can secrete some more drugs and drug metabolites and acids, depending if you have your blood pH is getting more acidic. And then with the reabsorption and collecting duct, you have the bicarbonate, some urea, but again, H2O depends on ADH or not. And what we have with secretion, protons or bicarbonate, depending if your blood is getting more acidic or alkaline. So what we have here is, like, again, PCT has all these ions and things that can be transported because it's the most active site of trading stuff between your interstitial fluid, your blood, and your renal tubules. The nephron loop, mostly about reabsorbing water and ions. DCT and collecting duct, more about these final touches that help to make that and adjust the concentration of the final urine. So I like to think, again, remember, with the DCT, another example with the PCT and DCT, say you're going to the bathroom and then you drop your phone in. Are you going to fish it out immediately, or are you going to use the restroom first and then try to fish it out? You want to grab it as soon as possible, right? So this is why if you have valuable things, you want to reclaim it as soon as possible and not let the waste product end up in the waste product, right? So this is like a way to think of it. Your PCT wastes no time. It grabs all the good stuff before it can actually become that final urine. It wastes no time in getting that good stuff and reclaiming it. So that's my analogy with the PCT and why it's so important, because again, important in reclaiming the good stuff, also secreting the bad stuff, and again, don't want to waste all that time for it to go through an entire renal tubule and try to claim it when it's at the last minute before it becomes urine.